What's new, 802? I'm Becca Hammond, and you're listening to Vermont Talks. Vermont Talks may include graphic or explicit content. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome, Mieko Ozeki, onto the podcast today. Mieko is the co-founder at Vermont Womenpreneurs. She is the owner of Radiance Studios, LLC, and she's also a small business and Vermont agriculture advocate. Welcome.
Hi.
So first off, you have an amazing list of accomplishments and things you've done in the state. I'm truly impressed by all of the different works you've done, by all of the different boards you're a member of. What is your what project are you most proud of in the, I don't know how many, I was trying to add them up. You've got at least 12 or 15 different things listed that you've accomplished in your life. Yeah. So which is the thing you're most proud of?
I mean, at present, I'm really proud of the efforts that I have put towards co-founding a group of women small business owners. Vermont Womenpreneurs has been one of my biggest achievements. And I'm really excited because the community is vast. There's a lot more women business owners out there, and through our network, they're able to find each other in a celebratory way, in a way that doesn't feel transactional. So that's one of my accomplishments I'm really proud of since being here in Vermont for the last 15 years. And otherwise, my other accomplishments has been, being able to create a space and voice for farmers markets and for farmers in general. So it's been wonderful.
And what foundation was that? I should have printed them all off and listed it because you're part of was it Farm to Table group?
Yeah, so I'm on various boards that involve agriculture. So one of our recent ones is Farm to Table Steering Committee. So that is a vast network of farmers, producers, retailers, anyone who's involved in the food system. And that was created actually part of a state mandate to investigate building network and then thinking about ways of how do we improve our food system in the state. And now we're actually thinking more so because of climate change regionally in terms of our food systems. And that opportunity has been wonderful because I get to see colleagues that I've started to know over the last 20 years through various organizations, and focus on the thing that I love the most. I love talking about food and I love talking about farms. But I just came back actually a couple of days ago, or actually yesterday, from the Farm to Plate gathering, which had over 300 people in attendance from representing different parts of that food system.
Very cool. And is there a lot of organic focus in that? Is it any?
No. So that has a lot more focus on kind of just getting everybody at the table. So from also including like food assistance programs, looking at land trusts and land and just anything to do with agriculture. Yeah, sorry, I'm still recovering from it. It's been it was like one of these most impactful kind of 2-day intensives of being in that network. The other hat I wear though is I'm also on the board of the NOFA Vermont, and that's more of the organic practices and getting more farmers involved with getting certified in organic certifications. Yeah.
There's a lot to that. So I actually grew up on a dairy farm, a very small one up on the Canadian border, and there's a lot to becoming organic. If you're a farmer who's been doing it for years and years and trying to switch into that culture, a lot of people don't know anything about it. Yeah. They don't have resources to do that. So that's a good program.
So Farm to Plate, NOFA, and then I'm also involved with the Vermont Farmers Market Association, which is basically a coalition of farmers market managers across the state. We also just talk it out of in terms of advocating for kind of the food assistance programs, also advocating for the farmers and the other vendors that we work for, and also just being able to be that accessible marketplace for our communities, not just for tourists, but really about being entrenched in our communities in terms of food access. So that hat I've worn, and in addition to being on the Intervale Community Farm board, where I kind of advise on there, but I'm also a CSA member. And during the floods, what I'm proud of, raising over $60,000 during the flooding, being able to help the farm kind of get to a little bit more stability, while also still supplying whatever they had remaining of food to our members as well as to community members.
That's fantastic. That's really impressive. 60,000. And there's so much damage, and it's so widespread, and it hit every single sector in Vermont. So that's a wonderful cause. Yeah, congratulations on raising that much.
Yeah. So all those hats have been really helpful. And then because of both Vermont Womenpreneurs and my involvement in farming and agriculture organizations, that's just given me the platform to be able to work with Senator Welch. We're actually right now I'm involved in his launch of the Women Economic Opportunity Conference, which will happen in 2024, which is an opportunity for women to think about their careers, and as well as small business owners. It's a big gathering, and it first started with Senator Leahy, who did it for 25 years with his wife, Marcel. And now Senator Welch took that over, and we're trying to figure out the best ways to get women to congregate and to be able to get the training they need to help them thrive.
That's fantastic. And we'll definitely swing back around. We'll talk a lot about Vermont
We're everywhere.
It's so interesting to me that you're on all of these different boards, that you're involved in all these different programs. You must meet such fascinating people. How did you get involved in that? I've never even considered, how would you become a board member? How did all of this start?
It all started actually just arriving in Vermont. So I grew up in New York City, and have kind of understood about building community, and also kind of standing out when you have a kind of a position. And so New York kind of is a great primer for that, because you got to stand out from the noise amidst all of that. And then I moved to Boston via Colorado and Boston. I've had a lot of experiences in between, from careers in environmental education, experiential education, to sustainability. And I came to Vermont quite accidentally, I would say. It was 2007 when my husband and I were like, we're going to leave Boston. We love our friends and everything else, but it's just not for us. And so we did, place shopping. We walked around. I didn't really think of Vermont until we landed here for a visit to the Burlington Farmers Market. And I was like, this place is different. It's different from Boston, and it's definitely different from New York. And it's kind of got the same culture. And I was very much involved in food. I had worked in sustainable agriculture in terms of education, educating young people about how best to use their foods and where their foods came from. And I started to have an interest. My career interest went from experiential education and environmental education into sustainability and environmental management. And while I was in Boston, I was getting my second master's at Harvard in that field, and they were talking about things called this movement called campus sustainability, and looking at college campuses as this micro ecosystem where you can create change, both policy, academic, as well as environmental policy, environmental implementation of change. And so I was interested in that, held on to that. And then when I was fed up with my last job in Boston, I put out to Facebook when Facebook was useful. But I posted to my colleague, to my friends, going, I'm looking for jobs maybe in Vermont or somewhere. And a friend sent me this post for UVM. They were just starting their office of sustainability. And my friend was like, you should apply for this. And, obviously 2008, when I applied, this is just the cusp before the recession happened. But I got interviewed. I was one of 100 candidates for a brand new field, a brand new institution that was being created, and our office that was being created. And I got the job. My husband also got a job in Addison County at the time in school systems, in technology. And we just coincidentally just got both landed jobs. And then 2 months later, the recession got called, and we still had our jobs. So we kind of got to thrive. So that was kind of an accidental thing. And for 8 years, I stayed at UVM implementing a clean energy fund, which the students tax themselves $10 per semester, which was about $250,000, implementing renewable energy projects on campus, both academically and installation wise. That along with traveling across the country all over to talk about sustainability on college campuses, exposed me to a whole wide network in the environmental field, which brought attention to kind of the work we were doing at UVM, but also kind of the work I was doing. I got published in establishing what it would be like to create and manage those a student-run renewable energy or sustainability fund. And because of that, I just had so many people. I was just like, my networks were just mushrooming. After 8 years, I decided I was going to move on. I moved on to Yestermorrow Design Build School.
Oh, very cool.
And yep. I, for 17 months, I worked there as the program and marketing director. So practically 2 full-time jobs. Kind of got burned out by that, but accomplished a lot while I was there. And I had in the back of my mind, I had always wanted to have my own business. And I actually had established one while I was at UVM because my boss, who was super supportive, said, you do this wonderful thing of career development with our interns. We don't pay you for that. We pay you for this other thing. You should create your own business. So I always had this business in my back pocket, and that was Radiance Studios. And when I left my job, I was like, ooh, I think I gotta commit and double down on this. So I was doing website building and then doing personal branding workshops. So personal branding being reputation management and how do you stand out from the fray, which I have been doing for decades of building a portfolio. And then you just evolve that into social media. How do you stand out with a voice like that? Doing that more the pragmatic way, not pre-TikTok, pre any of those things. I didn't have to dance or do, I wasn't a YouTuber, but was like, how do you build a reputation with your work and your portfolio? And that's kind of where I start from, the basis of a lot of my work now. And that job, like that, I took on more work as side work in addition to having my business. So I worked for VBSR, Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility, which actually taught me about growing a professional network, seeing it from the back end side of developing it. And then I took on the job of taking over the Burlington Farmers Market. Full circle moment, but from 2019 then through the end of 2020, I helped the Burlington Farmers Market not only run it, but also run it during the pandemic, and also during its it was within its first year of transition to its current location on Pine Street. So it was a lot to take in, but it also made me. I took that job as like a way to advocate for small businesses and farmers markets was kind of the launching point. And with, when I started for Burlington Farmers Market, I also had co-founded Vermont Womenpreneurs. And that was because I was burned out from that last job at Yestermorrow and had gone to a retreat and Knoll Farm, which they have a retreat called the Better Selves Fellowship, which is amazing. Right in the Mad River Valley. They bring in people from all over the country who are active in environmental work, and social work, social justice work, and free scholarship to do 6 days where you get to really retreat and take care of yourself and recollect yourself so you're energized to do the things that you have to do in your movement. And while there, after leaving Yes Tomorrow, I was like, it was 2 days after I left Yes Tomorrow, I was like, what do I do best? And I assessed everything I had done for the previous 20 years in nonprofits and also at UVM and then up to even Yes Tomorrow. And I was like, what am I good at? And I was like, I'm really good at convening people, total strangers. And I love doing that. Connecting them. I'm the kind of person who people will text me, message me, call me, and say the first sentence is like, you don't know me, but somebody said I should talk to you about, what's like a career decision or a pivot and a pivot they're making in their life, or a decision they have to make, or they need to find another resource. So I feel like I'm always the switchboard operator, like between connecting people. So I would do that. And then collaboration has been really big for me because often I find that being a leader is not about being in the front. It's about nudging people from the back is leadership, that you can encourage people to be empowered collectively and not necessarily as just one singular person. Because when you have leadership that is one person, one individual in the lead, if that person leaves, then everything kind of collapses. So collaborative work really strengthens ideas as well as moves along a whole lot of other things. And then the last part is I love celebrating. I love celebrating like people's wins. So I like to tell people when I do Vermont Womenpreneurs, I am your ultimate wing woman. I will be there to rally for you and tell your stories, amplify it as much as possible, cheer you on, clap, whatever it is, I'm there for it. And so those values, when I left that retreat after 6 days, and it was also the first time because I was a new mom, I had been away from my kid for 6 days, and it was a really interesting, freeing time for me to think about like what my aspiration of the values I wanted to be, whatever the next thing was. And a few months into taking my gap time between my jobs, between Yes Tomorrow and then starting with VBSR, I held on to those values of convene, connect, collaborate, celebrate in my gut. I held on to that. And then I took a workshop on solarpreneurship with a Center for Women in Enterprise. And like, first off, solopreneur was like a totally weird word, but I'm like, there's a lot of solopreneurs, I guess. And the person who would become for a while my mentor is Lisa Wood. She was teaching that, and I was at the table of all these other solopreneurs, and at the end of the session, she said, one of the hardest things about being a solopreneur is you are your own boss. Everything's up here. The accountability is all up here. Your ideas are up here and they're trapped and you have no one to relay it to. She's like, seeing that all of you are around, like, why don't you guys get together, have coffee, maybe do it. And I was like, oh, convene. Right. So that coincidence, that workshop set off the beginning of Vermont Womenpreneurs. And I just asked people around, like, would you want to meet at for coffee or, just to hold each other accountable? And a lot of people were like, yes. And so the first meetup we had was in January of 2018 at the Fletcher Free Library. And we had 15 women show up. I also put in the newspaper. It was one of the things too, my attitude at the time was, it's like, I was thinking about the scene in The Odd Couple, in the movie version, but The Odd Couple, where Oscar and Felix were having an argument. Felix, who's the control freak, was basically like got really angry at Oscar and threw a plate of spaghetti against the wall. And so I was like, the thing for me at that moment was anything that I was going to do from this point, because after at this point in my career it's throwing spaghetti on the wall. And essentially my attitude was, if this sticks, like if the spaghetti sticks, like for as long as it sticks on the wall, I'm in. Like I can do it. And so for me to put out, would people want to meet at the library to talk? That was just like, what is it going to matter? Like we go to a library, and if they do, they don't, I'll proceed either way. And people stuck around, and then they're like, when are you going to do this again? I was like, oh, I guess I'm doing this again. And so it became like month by month until, at that time, I also met my co-founder at another meetup. Actually, a friend was said, have you met Mieko? And my friend Bethany had just gotten fired from her job at Magic Hat the day before. And she turned around and she was like, I could see in her face. And I was like a couple months into my leaving my job. And I said, look, take advantage of this gap time, and was just consoling her. And she was already brewing up a business for herself. And actually today she's celebrating her 6 years since being fired. And she's putting posters up. She's actually becoming a known graphic artist as a result. But I found her through that, and we just clicked. I basically built Vermont Womenpreneurs looking at her starting her business and what she needed, and organized people so that others like her had a community to talk with, to share their journey and everything else. So it was a couple months into us doing our meetups that I said, well, what else do we do other than gathering at a library or a coffee shop? She's like, Bethany was like, I think we should do something like a science experiment, a science fair, where you get to go up on stage and just show and demonstrate what your business is, essentially, because all businesses are a science experiment, right? You put a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you see if it explodes or has a nice eruption, or is it's successful. And I was like, ooh, that sounds interesting. It's like, and so I was coming up with words it's like almost like a coming out party, like a cotillion or something, where people get to see your business. And luckily too, at the co-working space that I was working at called Study Hall, they were like, we're looking for events to do. So all everything was we say kismet. It all worked out. I found a co-founder. She had this idea, the space opened up, and I put together our first showcase. We had 20 women, which we invited to tell their stories. And the way I would describe it is like a Moth Story Hour meets TED Talk, except without the, I don't know, it's not a business pitch, right? It's a story, it's a journey. And and the first iteration, we had the 20 women who told their stories. We sold out 2 weeks before, because again, I was like, who wants to show up for this? And we sold out. We filled out the entire room. And what I watched as it unfolded, we had all these women sharing their stories, was my phone was on fire, because I also started the Instagram account, and my phone was on vibrate, would not stop vibrating. And it was because all the women who were sitting in the stage, or all sitting in the audience, and everyone who was attending was taking videos or writing down what they heard from the stories that really resonated for them. And they were sharing it across social media. I mean, this is the best organic kind of promotion, but at the same time, sincere sharing that people had about the event. And so that's actually what made Vermont Womenpreneurs kind of really grow organically. We went from like a couple hundred people to like several thousand over time because we were just sharing these stories. And after that showcase, I was like, oh, that's it, right? Like we just did that. And people kept going, when are you going to do it again? And I was like, oh, we're doing this again. Okay. And so we subsequently did another showcase. We sold out. We had to go to a bigger venue. The next year in 2019, we were at the comedy club. So we went from 90 to 130.
Yep.
Then then we did that show on Mompreneurs and showcasing folks there. And then the last one before the pandemic was at the was it the comic club at Foam Brewers, and it was called The Power of Two. So we had partnerships. People were telling their stories, and we filled about maybe close to 150 guests. And then the pandemic happened, and we just kind of like slowed down because luckily thing is like we could do virtual easily. We weren't really dependent on being in person all the time. And so we reverted so that we created that community virtually for folks to, as the shutdowns were happening and trying to figure out rules, people can kind of talk it out with each other. And we held on to that we still continue doing Zoom meetups because women across the state get to connect on that and network. We got back to doing in-person, doing like coffee meetups. And then we did our first summit in 2022 at Hula.
Cool.
And at the time I was like, who's going to show up? Because, after all this, I always say this and my friends are like, you're silly. They're going to show up. We filled the space with 230 people. So one of the hard things about Vermont is that there's not enough big spaces that are that feel like the kind of places where people can tell stories that don't feel a little too conventional, like too conference-y, conventional kind of space. So I'm looking for unique spaces all the time. And we've hit the point where we're like 250 is probably adequate enough. Maybe we can go to 300, but that's hard to find spaces across the state to do so. But so we've featured probably close to 60 or 70 stories. And then basically our meetups, we do once a month and across different parts of the state, we get to hear more and more stories. So I guess I would say one of the things I love about our meetups is that I facilitate them and I tell people there are only 3 things that you need to remember to say. So everyone gets to share in the circle is don't forget your name. Yeah. Don't forget what your business is. And then I'm going to give you a choose your own adventure. And we do the same thing similar to our showcases or some event stories is it's a choose your own adventure. It's to either share an aspiration you have for your business. For our meetups, we say, if you want to share an update or a win or something like that. So we would just something that when you finish your introduction and after we finish our circle, that somebody can sincerely come up to you and have a conversation rather than the awkwardness of networking, which is people are fishing for information. Right. And sometimes they're not sincere in their interactions with people. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing that people hate about networking, the traditional networking, is it feels transactional. So you don't feel fulfilled. There's this like feeling that somebody has taken something from you and you've not gained something, it's that really icky feeling. That's why some people really don't enjoy it. And I can think of an instance where, I when we started establishing this and we started to build a reputation, it's interesting how initially when I interact with people, they would be like, oh, like, what can I get from you? Like, what's the ROI? Am I having a conversation with you? Bethany will if she's by my side, she'll get upset at how people are like yucky handshakes and they, she could see that. And I don't get upset because I think growing up in New York, you get used to people who are like very transactional feeling. And so that's what we try attempting to do. And this helps a little bit for those people who are, the introverts and extroverts. They have that one time where they can say it. And then basically then people can have a sincere conversation. And that's also the point of the show, the summits, is that when people tell their stories afterwards, right, you have this like very quiet audience who you're like, one, telling your story, two, you're actually holding yourself accountable to total strangers.
Lots of them too.
Right. Like when women share their aspirations, it's like, oh, I've got to commit to this thing that I said I'm doing. The one part I also love in our meetups is watching. I will first get an email from somebody going, I'm not a business owner. I'm sort of thinking about it, but am I allowed to come to this? And that's even like just to be an audience member. Am I allowed to come? And I was like, of course, right? Like, I'm not saying no to you. Like, you should certainly come. But the moment I've watched is where a woman who's just started her business and hasn't verbalized that she's a business owner.
Yep.
And when this moment where she says, hi, my name is, I'm a business owner, or I just started my own business, there's this thing you see in their eyes. And she said it, and then she looks around and she goes, oh my God, in her head, I can see it. I just said that to people I don't know. I must be this. It's this like affirming feeling. And then also the women who, even if you have a small win, they're like, I was able to register my business, or I was able to have start my studio or open my retail space. The claps that people would get, just people would be clapping like, yes, you did it. It's so empowering to watch that for some of those women. They just light up.
That's so cool. This is all fitting together so nicely. It's like a puzzle that all fits. It just fits really nicely.
I mean, yeah, normally I would say I could. I have, like, it would sound like it's linear, but it's like all these the mosaic of these different experiences I've had. It's also kind of like it goes back to knowing who you are, what your experiences, where they have brought you, and then how do other people call upon your talents to do something that is either in service or does something that they feel that they can't do. So a lot of people are like, I can never do what you do in facilitating or whatever. I'm like, everybody could. It's just a matter of like, do you feel ready at that moment?
Right. And gaining that confidence in yourself versus, like you said, that moment where you realize that I'm a business owner. And
I mean, I struggle with all the time when I say that too, but at the same time, like, it takes practice. What I tell people is, I'm always iterating and you are always iterating. You're always practicing in believing what you are and who you are. And one thing I want to broach is this conversation I always hear, and it makes me cringe, is when people say they have imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. I don't believe in it because, frankly, after reading a lot of articles and reading, you realize that it's the environment that's around you. Like, the imposter is one, you're self-limiting of believing these things, but also the other part is it's not a medical syndrome first and foremost. It's not a medical thing. It's a phenomena, and it's a phenomena that's shaped by the environment we have, that the things that are influencing us, that feeling are, patriarchy, gender discrimination, racial discrimination, all of those are all making one feel that. And so it's a question of how do you change your environment? Yep. And it still starts with, where do you believe? And so that's why, like, when women say, I am a business owner, it's significant because you're changing the environment around you. It doesn't have to be, you have to wait for some male or patriarchal system to affirm that you are a business owner. You don't have to wait to be registered. Are you being entrepreneurial? Also, the big thing for me is I do the stump speech of basically, I don't love how entrepreneurship is co-opted by one single industry. So we focus so much on the tech industry of being, they're entrepreneurial. Wait, but what about the small business owner every day?
Right.
They're entrepreneurial, right? They're hustling. They're doing all of these things, and so I always, I go to UVM and I go to these entrepreneur talks and I'm like, let me remind you, there are more small business owners and they are entrepreneurial. And so
there's gatekeeping around that term in a very weird way. And I've noticed that myself where, oh, you're a restaurant owner. That's been done before. That's not the same as being a real entrepreneur. I've heard those kind of statements before.
That's insulting, though.
Exactly. It's totally insulting. And like the people who feed us, oh, well, you're not an entrepreneur because it's been done before. Like, obviously it's been done before. We're still alive today. We've been doing this forever.
Right. I mean, that's why things like the work that I'm doing with in the ag as well as in small business is that it's the co-opting of those terms, which also leads to not giving not being serious with treating those parties seriously. We don't give them the loans. We don't provide the funding. We also undercut them in terms of, how much we pay for things. So like farmers don't get paid well because we don't believe them to be a professional class.
Yep.
We don't, which is weird because they're selling us the things that sustain us. They're doing the work that sustain us. Why are they less than?
Yep. Yep. The infestation of the middleman has certainly hit the farmers very hard. And I think that's been true for more than a century at this point, at least in America, where, oh, you're a farmer, that's less than the person selling me the food, which is obviously not true, but I definitely can feel that.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, it was a long way of saying like, how does in terms of all these board memberships, it's because I just put myself in a niche of like, I happen to be at the right time. And most of it comes from my position is about how do we get the story out there in a way that now this word's been overused, authentic, that is truly about what's happening on the ground for these individuals. And then not being a gatekeeper, although technically my last name means gatekeeper, so it's weird, but that, not to be able to create the platform for them to share their stories and to have it, have some resonance for a lot of other folks. One of the other reasons why we started Vermont Womenpreneurs is at the time when women were championed here in the state of like, oh, these are these 5 women. I literally could count on my hand, and I'm friends with a good portion of them. These 5 women, they cracked the code of created these big businesses, and we heard their stories. Now, all of them, they had to whittle their stories so it could fit into a soundbite and whatever, and all that stuff. And I was like, well, what about the others? And that's why we created this showcase, is because there wasn't a platform for them to share, because they were undermined, being like, well, you haven't made this threshold in money, or you're not taken seriously. And so that's part of the reason why we created that platform for them, is to be able to be shared. And because of that, there's more attention to, whether in social media, like I see whenever we share a story about somebody we've learned about, or they've come to our meetings, that down the line, the media comes and finds them and gets their full story. So if that is what we can do for them, like I'm all for it, because they need that voice. They need that, I would say again, go being their ultimate wing woman. If I can nudge media to get attention on those folks, then that's wonderful. Subsequently, though, the people who have been like those 5 women, have shown up on our stage, and I always go to them, can I challenge you one way with one thing? Can you tell your story in a more expanded way than what you are told to curb for the media? And they love it, because they're like, man, I've been waiting for this opportunity to share.
I was just thinking, as you've been telling me your story, I really admire the fact that you don't have this one specific niche, because I feel like in the business world, that's what we're all told, is you got to pick your one thing And that one thing has to be your everything. You have to eat, sleep, and breathe this one specific thing. But that's not what you do. You are not specifically, oh, I'm in branding. Like, that's not what you're doing. You're telling your story. You're helping tell stories. You're really all encompassing. And I think especially women are very talented at that. A lot of women are really talented in so many different fields. And it's really inspiring to see someone bring all these different directions together.
Yeah, but I think that goes along with, I knew since I was in high school, one, I was the Renaissance, being a Renaissance person was very appealing to me. But I went to a magnet high school where specialization was the thing, and I really hated it. But at the end, by the time I got out of college, I was like, I'm a generalist, and you can't force me to be a specialist. I tried. That's why I ended up being a philosophy major out of undergrad, because I tried being an economist. That didn't work out. And I was like, well, philosophy works because I can understand the underpinning of things and principles. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And when I talk to college students, right, I know where they're at. Like, I know the particularly they have vested so much interest in 4 years of their life being dictated to being a specific thing. And I've been on career panels with, like, myself as the only female and mostly other men. But weirdly enough, where we all said our road didn't start with college dictated where we ended. We landed because either we asked or because we have an interest in it. This is where kind of how we've evolved we iterated our careers. I actually did that one time when my friends invited me to a career panel at Champlain College, and I saw this senior in the back of the room raise his hand after listening to all of our stories, which coincidentally, we all were like, we were not A to B, we were like A to D to C to Z. Like, we went all over the place to get where we were at that present moment. And he said, wait a minute, you mean my 4 years doesn't dictate like where I'm going to go after this? And we're like, yeah, I think that's pretty much what we're saying. I'm like, just watching, I was describing this moment to another person, like watching the like explosion happen in that person's head. But what we walked out, what we tried leaving with the audience was, it's the cumulative experiences that you have in your portfolio, which, you know, all too often we don't tell people to look back at that to then say, oh, what other thing can you try? What other thing can you borrow out of that? And then again, like what I've described, even like just the surface of the things that I've done, it's all from this portfolio of like storytelling and being able to create a space for others to be able to tell that story. And that's kind of what my whole career evolution has been.
It's really powerful. I think that's incredibly powerful, telling stories. Well, I mean, I obviously run a podcast. Yeah. I love hearing people's stories. It builds such a strong connection between people, though. And like you brought up, I'm relating to a lot of what you're talking about, where it feels so transactional when you meet some people. And I've had people on the podcast like that before. And I'm like, oh, I want more from you, but I can't force it. You can't force it. If they just want to give something very upfront and get something from me, that's all you can really do with people. But if you can open a conversation and really get people talking, all of a sudden that relationship means so much more. I'm far more willing to help people once I know their story and just appreciate who they are and where they came from. I love hearing stories. This is really fascinating to me. And I do have some questions about Vermont Womenpreneurs. So do you refer to it as a group or a club? And how are there members? How do you refer to everybody?
So I refer to everybody as a community. And then we do have members. We have some paid members. And that's more of like, I liken it to a crowdsourcing for our ability to do these really creative events. So, I don't like doing traditional networking events, as this probably was vocalized before. I like to do things where it's like, one, the event space is just it really, the event space is unique in a way that it allows people to feel like they can have a unique connection. So they can be able to talk to each other conversationally over some really good drinks or good food. And so be able to connect in that way. So a conference center doesn't do well. I've actually, it's my number one comment every time I go to a conference is like, well, everyone's energy is sapped when they're talking on a panel because look at the glowing lights and no windows, et cetera, right? So that's one part. The other part is that I want to highlight as many women-owned businesses in that space. So through products, who owns the place, et cetera. So that money that the membership goes, that the membership, which is $150 for the year, goes towards being able to plan these different events. Particularly, it goes toward our annual event, which is our summit, which is the biggest thing that we have. So all these other events lead up to this summit event, which is happening in 2024, is in June 5th at the Old Lantern Inn and Barn. And so because we sell out so quickly, it's a way for people also to know they're guaranteed to know first when the tickets, because we've sold out, last year we sold out within 2 weeks of like launching, which then then I'll have like a 60-person waiting list, which, is hard when people are like, I'm a new, they give you, and they go to me or they go to Bethany, which Bethany doesn't handle all the administration parts, but they'll write long cases like, this is why I got to go. And you're like, we don't have enough tickets.
Right. Oh yeah. I'm sure you would be more than happy to have everyone.
I would love to have everyone, but also that's why I'm involved with like the Senator Welch's, Women Economic Opportunity Conference, because that's a larger space, but it's also a way for a lot of women to be able to show up and connect with each other. Albeit it's going to be at a conference space.
I just realized how long we've been talking.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, we talked long-winded.
No worries at all. I always love if you get in a good conversation, I do not mind how long the conversations go. I do want to talk about your business, though, Radiance Studios. So I've looked at a few of your websites. They're absolutely beautiful that you've worked on. And I'm guessing here, I don't want to answer for you, but I'm guessing your clients tend to be people who you want to build up, whose story you appreciate.
I mean, it's a mix. I think a lot of them. So I work with small business owners who, so that could be in the realm of writers are included, artists are included, bands, makers, and then other kind of smaller businesses who just want to be able to manage their own website. So I work on Squarespace. So that's an all-in-one platform. And really my job, so I'm not a graphic designer, but I am a content strategist, so an organizer. I try thinking logically, how would your consumer go through and utilize your website? And I try organizing people's thoughts. A lot of the time, most of my clients are ones who are trying to escape WordPress. Yeah. So just because they, I think the initial, when somebody wants to start a website, they're all like, oh, I'm going to go for the first, like whether free or, the lowest cost. And when you go for something like WordPress, which was designed to be open source, it's actually much more complicated, even as a platform. And so I have most of my clients, some of them are older. A lot of them are the ones who are screaming like, I don't know how to do this. And so first I temper that anxiety with organizing their brain. And that's kind of one of my top skills is I mind map people's brains of just being like, how do we organize it? All that stuff. People with existing content, I joke like, I will Mary Kondo your your content, like because people are sometimes can be prolific. They don't know how to organize, and they don't know. So I spend a lot of time just sorting that out, and then by the time they come, it's kind of like clean, and I show them how to work on their website. And then my goal is not to be on retainer. My goal is like, you can maintain this. And if it's like really drastic and you can't find it in like the help section, I can help you with some of it. But for the most part, I just want people to be able to manage their own content. And then I do like workshops on personal branding and also on marketing. So, but yeah.
Very cool. And so you're on the Squarespace platform typically. And are you married to that? Are you a partner with Squarespace?
No. So I'm a power user for Squarespace. I've been with them for over like as a power user for like over, I don't know, 10 years since starting my own website, and then just built a portfolio from there. And so actually people who are on Squarespace who use it and make websites for other clients are called circle members.
Okay, I saw that term. Yep.
And we provide, we don't work for Squarespace, but because we like Squarespace a lot and we build out of our website, we kind of are able to give discounts on like the platform, utilizing the platform. And also more easier access to their support versus like trying to figure it out on own. I mean, granted, I don't blame people for wanting to do it on their own, but really what gets people in people's way, whatever platform they work on, is that people are not organized. You know, they don't know how, it's overwhelming. And they actually they stumble into the technology before they understand the basics. So like earlier, as I said, in storytelling, to me, it's the collection of that content and organizing it and then putting it into like a certain order. So, and a lot of people just rush. And so my job is to slow it down and then map it out and then work with them.
And there's definitely something to be said to just kind of giving the right impression. I noticed with a lot of the sites, as soon as I open them, it's wow, this is, you immediately get a feel for the business, and it's almost like an emotional thing as soon as that page loads. One of the ones I checked out was in Mad River Valley.
Oh, yeah.
It was one of the most recent ones that you had listed on your page. And I immediately just got that sense of zen. And I said, oh, this is such a beautifully laid out website. And then they were it was like a resort or some sort of massage therapist or something like that.
Yeah, she's a massager, yeah.
Yes, and it was just, I immediately got that feel from the website, that's powerful.
Well, and the thing is that, you know, in that instance and also another, like other websites, just, you know, that client went, I started to try doing it myself, but then I got overwhelmed and I don't know. And like, and then you're like, okay, tell me what your business is about. Okay. And like, I start writing things. And one of the things too, is I structure, here's your homework. Here's what we just discussed. Fill this in. I'll look over your copy, you know, all of that stuff, your photos. I want you to think about this. I do a little bit editorial in my mind of like, this is your shot list. This is the things that you need to do in terms of having that. And that, I think if anything, is just to be able to prepare people, whether on their website or other materials that they use, to think about what they need to broadcast their story.
Very cool. So I think we're going to wrap it up. Is there any specific website you'd like to point people to? Obviously, Vermont Womenpreneurs, you can find. I've been following you guys for a few years at this point, and I'm so glad we got to talk about all these things because I had many questions following your Instagram account. So is there any specific website you'd like to send people to?
I mean, I think Vermont Womenpreneurs is the main focal point for me. I've been involved with so many other organizations. Also, if you want to know more about the other organizations I'm in part of, they're all listed on my personal website. And hopefully, actually, I think if people are trying to figure out, like, how do I even personally stand out, and, you know, what I say, if you have your own website or your social, you're putting a kind of a digital footprint for people to find you. You can certainly look at my profiles to see what some of the examples of how you would do that.
Fantastic. Okay. All right. So our show notes for today are going to be at vermonttalks.com/40 episodes in. Woo. Thank you so much, Mieko.
Thank you.
Got your name right. Good. Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to the end of the show. Subscribe to Vermont Talks on your favorite podcasting platform. You can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all over the web. Contact Becca at vermonttalks.com if you'd like to be interviewed or if you know someone who should be. Thanks so much to Jason Baker for creating the show music. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are those of the individuals and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Vermont Talks. Any content or statements provided by our guests are of their opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, anyone, or anything. And that's what was new in the 802. Have a great day.